Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
Okay, welcome to episode 17 of the Retro Disney World podcast. This is titled From Vinyl Chairs to Elephants and Hippos. And this month we'll be talking to someone who got to start working at Walt Disney World in a kind of an interesting fashion. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and sitting in with me tonight, as always, is Hal Bowers.
Aloha.
Hey, Hal, how it's going? Brian P. Miles.
Greetings from the birthplace of our nation's independence.
And
Philadelphia, if you didn't pay attention.
Yeah, if you haven't been paying attention past 16 episodes, he's from Philadelphia.
Wait, that's Philadelphia?
It is.
The city of brotherly love.
Oh, that one, yeah.
And JT just piped up. JT, how are you tonight?
I'm good. Greetings from the former rubber capital of the world.
Former rubber.
Where did the rubber go? I said outsourced.
He's talking about Ohio, folks.
Ohio, yeah.
Where rivers catch fire.
That's right.
Yes, it did.
So tonight we also have another guest this month we're going to talk to whose grandfather was a master carver, I guess you could say, at the Magic Kingdom during its construction. So we're going to talk to her in a little bit. Before we go over to that part, normally we do a questions and comments. And actually this month we're going to open up to you, the listeners, to send us some comments back via a survey. So we put together a short 10-question survey. And we'd appreciate if you could all head over to it and give us your feedback so that we can improve this podcast and bring you the things that you want to hear. So if you head to retrodisneyworld.com/survey, that will take you directly to the questions, and appreciate if you could fill that out for us. So with that, we're going to get right on to our listener mail. JT, you ran to the mailbag. What do we have this month?
Our friend Joy Johnston wrote us email, sent us, said, I just found your podcast and it is absolutely awesome. I love it. It is so informative and interesting, which I agree. I also think that your website is fantastic. I could be on it for hours. Your videos and photos are great. Brings back so many memories. When the parks and the attractions were new. That's kind of an interesting take. I never thought about it being new. And then finally said, thank you for all your time and effort you put into both the podcast and the site to bring magic to us. You guys are just awesome.
Well, thank you, Joy. I agree.
I do think we're pretty good, huh? And Joy, if you like the website, we are working on a new version of it that should be not only easier to navigate, but we're going to be working on making it mobile friendly as well. So that's coming up in the next hopefully month or two, if not sooner. And JT, we have another pseudo-list. Well, she's not a listener yet, right?
No, I think she will be, though.
She will be after we speak with her. So we got in touch with Kelly Wise Valdez. And while she's not a listener of our podcast yet, she recently posted on Facebook. And Brian, I believe you found it first, or somebody had recommended it in your feed.
Well, it went viral very quickly amongst the Disney nerd community.
That's right. And it was pictures that her grandfather worked there. So we're going to give her a quick call here. And
her grandfather worked during the construction of the Florida property.
Right. And she has some interesting stories to tell. So we welcome Kelly Wise Valdez to the show. Kelly, welcome.
Great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for joining. So, Kelly, you had posted a number of photos that sounds as though you stumbled across of your grandfather. And he was I believe you said, a master craftsman woodworker, and he worked down at the Magic Kingdom during its construction, correct?
Right, that's correct.
Now, how did you come about finding these photos?
Well, he passed about 12 years ago, and my grandmother passed about 3 years ago, and we all, cleaned up her stuff, and we all got boxes of things, of which I don't even know how we even divided up who got what. And but I am a Disney fan, and I did work for Disney, and the oldest of the grandchildren. So I
Uh-huh.
got this box full of miscellaneous Disney memorabilia, which at the time I was, in the middle of my life, I was busy, didn't pay attention to it. Well, I'm in the midst of moving and closing on a house in 2 weeks. And so I'm packing and I'm trying to get rid of things. And I saw this box. I'm like, oh, I wonder what's in this box my
Right,
grandmother
right.
gave me. It had miscellaneous things in it. And in the bottom of it was a small brown old leather album. And I remember thinking, what in the world is this? And it just said photo album. And I opened it up and I just saw a bunch of cranes and scaffolding at some point and I closed it up. And then I don't know, I remember thinking, I don't know what that really was. So I opened it up again and I started flipping through it. I saw Cinderella's castle being built and I was like,
Uh-huh.
oh my gosh. I said, who knew that I had this? This is interesting. I didn't think it was particularly fascinating, but I was like, huh. So I took a picture of one of them on my cell phone and posted one picture, which is my grandfather standing in front of the castle. I posted it on Facebook. Well, then I had about, I don't know, 1,184 friends, and about all of them was like they went crazy, and they were like, "Do you have any more pictures?" And I was like, "Well, actually, yeah, I have a whole album of them, but I don't really have that kind of time." So I just scanned like another 13, and I posted the other 13, and then I guess that's when it's considered it went viral. I've never had anything like that happen before, and it just started. I mean, the ball started rolling, and people started sharing, and I was quite fascinated with it because I couldn't figure out why everyone was that fascinated with it.
Right.
And so then I, started doing some research, and quite frankly, there isn't a lot online that you can find that's random amateur photography of that stage of the game. And so I think Disney pretty much probably had a lot of staged photographs, but not a lot of amateur photographs. And I think that's why people have really been fascinated by it.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think we've probably seen all of the construction photos from the various Disney guidebooks and preview books when they were building the Magic Kingdom about 1,000 times in different publications. So you're right. It was like a eureka moment when we saw these photos. Like, oh my goodness, look at this.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
it's been really the feedback I've gotten has been crazy. And I contacted my dad because my dad's still alive and that was his father. And I'm like, hey, have you ever seen these photos? And he's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And I showed him and he was, like, how did you get these photos? And I'm like, they were in the box that I got, from grandmother's house 3 years ago. And he's never seen them. No one, to our knowledge, has ever seen them. And my grandfather would be getting a big kick out of this right now, actually. And so we've been speculating over the last few weeks, how did this even happen? But
Right.
he did like photography, and he did have a big, huge 35 millimeter camera, the olden days photography, with your,
The real film.
the film and the whole nine yards. And he was a little bit mischievous. And this is my thought process. You're probably not allowed to take pictures of it under construction. He probably did anyway and didn't show anybody. That's just my guess because that's kind of how he rolls.
He was
So.
one of the first undercover.
Undercover, yeah, because you
Dark
know you're
side,
crawling
yeah.
up on scaffolding and you've got a big camera with you and you're crafting things with your hands. How are you taking pictures?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
he did.
that's interesting because I mean, obviously there were thousands of people working. In fact, Hal had a couple of relatives that went down there to work on the construction of the park when they were first building it. You would think by now we would have seen a lot more amateur photos emerge
Right.
from that phase, and we haven't. So you make a good point, Kelly.
Yeah, it's amazing and they've held up fairly well. I mean, I know you all saw them in their raw stages.
Right.
I the fact that I've scanned them so they're not going to further deteriorate is is a thrill for me because I didn't know they were in there. I could have very well never seen them, and they could be ruined and never seen again.
Exactly.
So that's amazing. And a lot of people, thousands of people have contacted me, quite frankly, all over the world, and a lot of them are like, my grandfather worked at Magic Kingdom. My grandfather was there too, and did your grandfather know my grandfather? So I got a lot of people wanting to connect on that kind of level with me, and which was amazing. And I found out from my dad, which is the weirdest. My dad and I have had more conversations about Disney World and my grandfather in the last probably 2 weeks than I have in the past 49 years we've been alive. But he said that after the Magic Kingdom was completed and the construction was over, that my grandfather was one of a very small handful of craftsmen that were actually kept on and made full-time and permanent employees.
Wow.
That the rest of the people were just contractors and they had to move on after it was done. And my grandfather was actually kept on and he did continue to work there doing craftsmanship for Disney until he retired.
Wow. And how long is it? When did he retire?
He retired in, let's see, I actually started working there myself in 89.
Okay.
He probably retired in about 85.
85. Okay. Wow. Now, in one of the emails you sent me that we had exchanged, you had mentioned that they even lived on property in one of a number of rare homes, and you as a child remember seeing the fireworks from their front porch over the castle.
Yeah, and that's another kind of interesting story because that happened primarily because my grandmother, she worked for RCA, and she actually got transferred to the Magic Kingdom, technically, working for RCA, who had a contract to build Space Mountain.
Right.
And she was an administrative assistant. So that's how they all kind of ended up in Orlando when Disney was being built. She met, and she was a great administrative assistant. She was very organized and very likable. And so one of the directors, the high executives, I want to say like a vice president of food and supply distribution, needed an administrative assistant and actually hired her away from RCA and hired, so she was a full-time salaried administrative assistant for one of the high executives. And she actually helped set up the executive offices during when the Magic Kingdom was being built. So, at the time, they were also trying to incorporate, which you probably know the story, the Reedy Creek Improvement District / Lake Buena Vista.
Right.
The only way you can incorporate it is if you have citizens. So the directors all got together, and through a series of events, I guess my grandparents got picked to be part of these 10 homes that were put on Disney property, and they were the only 10 residents. And it was like, I remember as a kid knowing it and knowing that they lived in an odd place, knowing they lived on Disney property. But when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, it just becomes like, well, normal. You don't really think anything of it.
Sure.
And so it was just so strange because when I started working for Disney, I worked for Disney owns their own telephone company at the time. It was called Vista United Telecommunications. And I'd be like, I'm going to go to my grandparents for lunch. And they're like, well, we're in the middle of Disney. How do you get there and back in an hour? I'm like, oh, they just live right there. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, yeah, they live right there. They're the people that live right there. And all my coworkers were like, are you kidding me? They're one of those people? I mean, because apparently that was like, it was like living in the castle.
Right,
You're
right.
the chosen one. And like there was like a waiting list a mile long. Like literally people have to die to leave those 10 families. And some of them, it was like they would take turns like, oh, you can be the mayor this year, Chet. You can be the assistant mayor, Betty. I mean, it was just strange. They were commissioners and mayors, and they all just changed positions every few years.
No.
And they lived so close that literally we could stand in the front yard and I could see the Magic Kingdom fireworks. We would go in the back way into Disney. It would take us like, 3 minutes to get to the Magic Kingdom. And, and I really took it for granted back then because when you're a kid, you don't know. And when I became an adult, then I realized more. And I think that's one of the fascinating things about the pictures themselves is that I think it's when you go into the park, all you want to do is I want to get to those rides or I want to see Mickey. And it's kind of a little bit of sort of a shame that you had all these master craftsmen that literally did so much, amazing craftsmanship and work and into every detail of every window frame and every door and every nook and cranny and no one really notices it. It's beautiful in general with the architecture, but you don't walk in and go, wow, look at that window,
Right.
And so it's a little bit sad in the fact that I remember walking through the park with my grandfather, right, even when it opened and him pointing out to me things like, I did that door, I made those windows. And I remember thinking, who cares? I want to see Mickey Mouse and I want to ride, It's a Small World. And totally not appreciating all the hard work he did.
Right,
So,
right.
so I think they should do some kind of architectural tour for people who are interested in that kind of thing. That would be interesting.
That's a great idea. And you're absolutely right. There's so many tiny little things that over the years and the people, like you said, often overlook. And it's the sum of all those things that just make the experience that much more interesting and more immersive. But we do forget about all those different things. And just in one item in particular, it's my understanding that your grandfather carved the door on the Liberty Tree Tavern. Is that correct?
That is legend has it. No,
Legend
that is
has it.
what he told one of my cousins that's when it was funny because the cousins now have all talked because they've seen the pictures. Because I had possession of them, and that was their grandfather too.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all kind of been sharing, like, well, what did he tell you, and what did he tell you? And we've all heard all these different stories. We've been putting the pieces together since this whole thing has gone viral. And one of my cousins, the one that said that he told me he made the Liberty Tavern door. And so I went, online and tried to find pictures of it. And I did finally find a picture of it, but I went through the photo album and there is no picture of it in the photo album, which is a little bit unusual because it looks like most of the pictures he took were specific to what he had worked on. With the exception of maybe just the large overhead photographs where he was taking a picture of the vastness of the construction project. But some of the pictures were specific things that he was working on. And I did not see Liberty Tavern, but I realized that most of the things I saw were located in the front part of the Magic Kingdom, and not in any other location. So I don't have anything other than, I think I have the Pinocchio's Village. And other than that, I don't see anything else. And I know he worked on other parts of the park. Oh, I know. The Frontierland, where I thought that was one of the coolest pictures, is the Tiki Room picture.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to send you a picture here. I think this is the picture where you're referring to, right? So as you know, we spoke and we wanted to work on your photos for you, and thank you for coming on the show. That's
amazing. Thank you,
and everything.
Guys.
So this is just a sampling here of what we've been able to do with the photos. So for all of our listeners, what we're showing Kelly is that we're taking her photos and we're going to fully color restore them all, and so that everybody can see them. They faded over time, and we're going to bring them all back to life for her. So yeah, hopefully you can see the difference there between.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, we've put a lot of different filters and things on there to bring the colors back. So.
And that's one of my favorite pictures there, because as soon as I saw it, I'm like, that's the Tiki Room.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember him talking about that.
There's a smattering of Tomorrowland photos in there as well, and there's a great shot of the main monorail station being open, which being constructed, rather.
Right.
To get back to the woodworking for a second, so I think part of the thing is I always just assumed there was a catalog someplace that had this stuff in it that, Disney would order, okay, give me one of those and one of those. But it sounds like what you're saying is your dad was a master woodworker and they were actually building this stuff to spec by hand the old way. And that is absolutely amazing now that I know that. And I'm going to come in there with a whole new appreciation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, in one of the pictures you can see where the actual window frame that he was crafting, he had down flat. And then it's the one, I think, with the Contemporary Hotel being built in the background. And he had it down flat, and he had the specs, and he would craft it, and then he would put it then actually insert it into where it was going. So he crafted them first and then attached them to the building.
Yeah. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the way that this used to work, in the old days, you would have a rough finisher who would come into a building. So if you're looking at if you ever been in a building that was built in like the early 1900s, you'd have a rough craftsman that would come in and sort of do the lentils and put in the rough woodworking. And then a master craftsman would come in after that person and actually do all the detail work and all the fine finishing detail that you see in these older houses. And it sounds like they did that same exact thing here, which just blows my mind.
Yeah, and he works, specifically on windows and doors a lot. And I know that he did all of it by hand, because I remember his hands being rough, and I remember him talking about it, and then he worked long, hard days, and it does give you a whole new appreciation for, the hard work that it went into making the details that people don't notice. And one of the things that I remember him telling me was that the windows up top were smaller because they wanted to give the illusion of the building being bigger. Right, and I remember him telling me that when I was younger, and I remember not thinking that I cared very much about that, but you can see that in some of the pictures. Yeah. And one of the pictures that I posted and that went viral, some engineer took it and schematically showed me what was what in the whole entire thing. It was kind of funny. Some of the responses I've gotten from people, I've gotten a lot of construction companies wanting to post the pictures on their sites because of the craftsmanship that it shows, and just the fact that people don't do that anymore the way they used to do it in those days. So It's been the response has been kind of overwhelming, and I've only released the first 13 pictures, and you guys, I think I gave you all of them, right? And so most people haven't seen even the rest of them, and I actually was quite worried. I'm like, I don't know if I have that kind of time to post the rest of them.
We can't thank you enough for coming on the show. And by all means, we're going to correct all 47 photos, make sure that they're appropriately shared out there with your credit, and make sure that everybody has a chance to view them, because they're spectacular. And I know for years to come, as Brian said earlier, we've all sat there for hours and hours looking over old construction photos, all the public ones that have been out there for so long, stock photography. And I know these pictures will be scoured over for years to come as people try to unravel additional construction mysteries and timings and how things, were back then, because there's so little information documented about the construction and placement, for everything from placement of buildings to how specific buildings were constructed and manufactured. So,
right. Well, my grandfather started
stuff.
looking down, getting the biggest kick out of the whole thing. So he was very meticulous and he was very mischievous. So this is how we got the pictures, I think.
There we go. There we go. Well, Kelly, again, thank you so much for joining us.
Great.
Much appreciated. And we'll make sure to let all of our listeners know when and how to take a look at the photos.
Awesome. I appreciate it, guys. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Thanks, Kelly. Bye-bye.
What a really great treat for everybody. We all have our little places in the Magic Kingdom where we walk around, and
Yeah.
they make us think of different things. And now I'll never walk down parts of Main Street or look at certain windows or the door to the Liberty Tree Tavern without thinking of Kelly's grandfather.
That's right. And what's amazing is that that photo she mentioned with the contemporary in the background, I'm looking at it right now. The amount of detail that gentleman was putting in at the second, third floor of a building that hardly anybody would look up and see is amazing. Just so much detail. And now you start to look up a little more, and now you're going to start to look at things definitely.
I think in that one, I can see actually, and now correct me if I'm wrong, the left side, the monorail track of the contemporary, missing the part.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
that?
you're correct. The two beams that
The two
Tom
beams
Nabby
are
told us
missing.
had
And if
fallen
you
off
look
the
to the
train.
right, you can actually see Nabby walking down the track. It's seriously gone. It's not there.
That's what an eagle eye there. You've got it. You've nabbed it.
I'm gonna drop this
Or you
mic for the
nabbied
night.
it, right? You
JT,
retire.
we'll
You're
see
good.
you next month.
You're good tonight.
I'm out.
So, well, once again, we thank Kelly Weisveld for coming on, and appreciate her for sharing those photos, and we'll let you know when and how they're available. All right, well, it's time to do this month's audio rewind. Last month we had a good one. Who got it this month? I'll tell you this, it was the record number of entries this month.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys saw them coming. They were coming in fast and furious all month.
Yes, they were.
So, did anybody get?
No,
You didn't get it.
What?
Oh,
I knew what it was. I knew this one.
You knew this one. All right. So let's take a listen to last month's. All right. Well, you guessed Now Is the Time from the Carousel of Progress. You are correct. That was the second song, the Carousel of Progress, that replaced Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. Around what time frame was that? How 80?
Well, it came in 1975 when the attraction moved to Florida,
right,
and did not get removed until 1994 when it was redone and became Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress.
Right. And the quick story there is the sponsor, General Electric, the CEO, thought that they needed not a song about a great big beautiful tomorrow, but that the great big beautiful tomorrow was already here. So that's why they had the Sherman Brothers write a new song for the sponsor. That now is the time, not tomorrow. That now is the time that your refrigerator and stove can make your life earth-shatteringly better.
Exactly. A little carpe diem.
And it's true.
Yeah.
My gosh.
Ice
I don't have
now
to
still
lug,
is the time.
I don't have to lug irons from the stove anymore when I'm doing the ironing.
And
Those
ice
days are
just
over.
magically appears in your freezer.
Right. Yeah.
I do, however, still keep a bucket of water handy to prime the cistern with.
There you go.
And for Rover. And for
Nice
Rover
cold
keeps
bath
the-
now and then is usually probably fine too. So you're all sitting there listening. You want to know who the winner is, and congratulations to Rachel Cook. You have won the autographed Tom Nabby book, so we'll get that out to you as soon as possible. So congratulations, and of course we have another audio rewind for this month, and this month's prize is going to be a book from RJ and Suzanne, a copy of their book Together in the Dreams. So let's take a listen to this month's audio rewind puzzler.
Gee, it sure is dark in here. There's gotta be a light around here somewhere. Ah, this ought to do it. Whoa!
All right, Pinhead, listen up. Your job is to pilot this craft through a typical day's maneuvers without overstressing it. Remember, use your head, don't lose your head. I've got my eye on you, Fuzzy. Screw up this mission and you'll be piloting a chicken till your retirement day. Got that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you think you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind puzzler, send your entries to podcast@retrodisneyworld.com. A random winner will be drawn from all the correct entries to receive this month's prize. And please submit your entries on or before April 12th, 2016. And all entries will be entered in for the big prize pot drawing, which will be done in December 2016. So far in that prize pot, we have an Orange Bird yo-yo, the brochure from the World of Motion, a Golf Resort Mickey head logo golf bag tag. That's a mouthful. And I'm going to add something this month, guys. Any idea?
What is it?
I'm going to add...
Is it a new car?
It's not a new car. I'm sorry.
Is that the Cavalier there?
A year's supply of rice-a-roni.
Canned peas. No, I have the Epcot. It's the maroon, orange, yellow salt and pepper shaker, the rainbow salt and pepper shaker.
The original 1982 salt and pepper shakers.
Exactly.
They get both salt and pepper?
They get both salt and pepper. I'm not just giving one.
Yeah. One's got 2 holes in it, and the other has 3.
Exactly. It's your choice which you like heavier. If you like salt heavier, go for the 3. So
it's a good tip to go with your prize pot.
I mean, otherwise
it's an insider tip.
People could be looking at this going, which one is salt, which one is pepper? They don't have the P and the S,
It's the cutout. Yeah, I know what you're
Yeah. So
that's a good one though. Yeah. That's has it been used? Like, is there pepper
it has
in
not.
it?
It looks they look fantastic. So
awesome.
Maybe next month somebody could add salt, and the next month somebody could add pepper to the pot, so you're like getting like a full grocery order.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. We'll give you a bottle and some juice too. So, all right.
So prize pot's growing is what we're saying.
Exactly. So again, if you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind puzzler, send your entries to podcast@retrodisneyworld.com on or before April 12th, 2016. All right, so this month we have 2 very special guests. We have RJ and Suzanne Ogren on. They both had very unique positions at Walt Disney World in years past, and we're going to be speaking to them tonight and talking a little bit about their book that recently came out. We've all read it. Some fantastic stories in there. And RJ, Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah,
very happy to be here.
Excellent. So we read your book. Some absolutely fantastic stories in there. We have to, go over a couple of them here. But why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about your book and also about a real high level what you guys did down there, and then I've got some additional questions and things for you for some stories.
Okay. Well, I was very lucky to finally get on with Disney World in the early 70s and. Actually mid-70s, and I was a monorail pilot, but only for 3 months, and very lucky I became one of the 4 original audio animatronic artists. We were called animation artists because it was easier for people to say, and we were the ones who put all the skins on all the figures, the presidents, pirates, ghosts, animals, and we painted those skins with special paints. And all the sets came under us, all the murals, all the props. And we had an incredible time because it was just the 4 of us in a studio behind It's a Small World.
And how many years did you do that for, RJ?
4.
4 years.
I know. There's a reason for that. But,
yep, we read the book.
I have done a lot of work off and on for Disney over the years since then too.
Right.
And then Suzanne came on after I got there, and I'll let her tell you what she did.
Oh, thank you. Well, basically, I got his job in monorails because I was trying to get on in entertainment, but was not having any luck. And he told the supervisor in monorails about me wanting to work there, and he got me the job in monorails. I ended up there a year and a half, which was great, and I love telling about that in the book. But eventually I got to where I wanted to be, which was a dance audition to get into characters. And I was in characters for about a year, and left the company because of injuries and came back again 5 years later in 83 and stayed until 94 in entertainment management. So I had a varied career. His was more focused than mine. But that was why we titled the book Together in the Dream, because we both had a dream of working for Disney since we were kids. That was how we reached our dreams.
One of the very first stories that stuck out for me, RJ, you mentioned vinyl, and I thought the way that you landed the job was one of the most unusual ways, and I never thought that repairing vinyl chairs could get you a job at the Magic Kingdom.
As I call them, the stupid vinyl chairs. Prior to getting on with Disney for about a year and a half, now I have a college degree as an art teacher. I only taught for a year. We happened to move to Orlando from Miami in 73, just as we were going into a really bad recession. And all of a sudden there was no work anywhere, and I started a little business repairing vinyl chairs because all the hotels outside of Disney property, there was 22 of them, went into receivership, and the banks took them over. And I knew that they wouldn't be buying new vinyl booths or convention chairs or even new pads for the seats, but they would be willing to pay like $1 for me to come in and repair the vinyl using heat and glue, and then using spray paint.
You mean per chair?
Per chair, yeah, per chair. It was $1 for 500 chairs.
It's a rough time.
Yeah, rough time.
Stack and unstack thousands of chairs every month to find like 500 chairs that had a $1 rip in them, and I hated it. It was a terrible, terrible job, and all I could ever kept thinking was, I've been reduced to repairing these stupid vinyl chairs, and through circumstances, I got a job as a monorail pilot finally at Disney, and then 6 weeks into it, an ad came up for they were looking for a fourth artist. Actually, I was going to replace Leota Toombs, who had been there training the other 3 artists and had gone back to L.A. to the studios. And anyway, I went through 5 weeks of interviews and with some of the famous artists of Disney. Very weird. All of a sudden, I beat out 13 other people, and when I found out about it, that I was going to be a management artist, I had to ask the director who handled the whole process of the interviews what I did different to beat out some really good artists, and there were some really good people there.
Right.
And he said, well, remember what you didn't want to put on your resume, and your wife insisted you had to put it on there. And I said, he said, you didn't want to talk about it either. I said, the stupid vinyl chairs? He goes, yes. I said, well, why? He says, well, the skins you're going to be putting on the figures, like the presidents and pirates, is reconfigured hot melt vinyl glue for strength. You use heat to melt the skin together and cut it and everything else. And then you use the acetone-based paint to paint them, which is the same paint you used on the stupid vinyl chairs, as you call them. The stupid vinyl, nobody else had done anything like this. So the stupid vinyl chairs got you the job as a Walt Disney World artist.
Look at that. So you never would have thought. I remember seeing commercials in the late 70s and early 80s too for those home vinyl repair kits. Did you ever try any of those?
God,
that's what it was.
That's what it was. Okay.
New vinyl.
New vinyl. That's right. Now, jumping over to your monorail experience, we've got a question for you. Last month, we spoke to Tom Nabby, and he invented something called the Nabby Grabber. And I don't know do you guys ever recall utilizing the Nabby Grabber while
daily basis?
Both of us.
You did.
I actually met Tom Nabby a couple times because for a brief period when I came back to Disney in the management area, I was working for the director of transportation, Dwight Dorr, who was a good friend of Tom's, and he would come up to the office and they'd talk. And I asked him, what brought you to invent this thing? And he said, well, because people kept dropping stuff down in the trough, you know, the direct current is to the monorails, where you can't exactly jump down there and get it out without electrocuting yourself. And believe it or not, almost on a daily basis, we would have Mickey Mouse ears, plush toys, clothes, everything.
Kids,
and those
babies.
things were those things were incredibly helpful.
Right. one month we find out who invented it, and the next month we've got the people who actually utilized it. So
we know, RJ. Tom told us specifically everything but children.
Yeah.
They could not pick up children with them.
Thank God we never had that happen.
We did not pick children and babies up out of the...
No.
That's right. Now, Suzanne, you had experience as a character, and there's certainly some interesting stories and sad stories, the way that some people treated you, and even some of the stuff that RJ worked on treated the attractions. But I had some questions. Your experience as a character during the Eastern Airlines promotion. I think we have a photo somewhere floating around on our website. We're going to have to find it, see if it's the one. But that story was interesting. How they flew you down to Miami. This is when Eastern Airlines was the big sponsor. You dressed up. You had the hat was off, the hat was on. It was in and out. It was in the plane. It was out of the plane. I'd like to find out if the picture we have is indeed the one that you were. You were posed in. But I thought that was a really neat thing. We never hear a lot about characters doing things outside of the Magic Kingdom, especially something like that, as important as Eastern Airlines was at the time.
Yeah, it was really special for us because there was a lot of competition in the character department as to who's going to get to go. Are we going to get to do this? Because they only took, I think, 12 of us. I don't remember now. I have to look back in the book. But it was fantastic to do. And the neat thing is that I'm still in touch with Jimmy Gray, a friend of mine who played Doc in our Seven Dwarfs unit, and also for that commercial, he was Peter Pan. And he told me a story I didn't know about him actually being taken down there the day before the rest of us went on the flight to go down. And he was working with a stuntman and the director with a harness outfit and a crane, because they actually photographed him flying above the plane. So the story I tell in the book is about him volunteering to go up and lay on top of the plane for that still shot.
Well, the picture that we have here, Brian was just able to pull it up. There's a number of characters. It's kind of a pyramid shape of characters leading up the air stairs up to what looks like a Boeing 757.
Flight attendants and stuff.
Yeah, and dressed in yellow. Now, who were you? Were you Doc?
No, I was Sleepy.
You were Sleepy.
And there's a guy laying on the roof of the plane.
Yep, there's Peter Pan. Yep.
That's Crazy Man.
Not just any guy on the roof of the plane.
If you've read the book, you know that Jimmy was known for doing things when he was in the dwarf unit with me that weren't exactly things we're supposed to be doing, but we had a lot of fun.
It's a great shot. Water is a prominent feature in some of your stories too. So we've got a number of water questions we need to ask because there's a couple of things.
Fell in.
Yeah, you went. You fell into pirates a few times. Does the water feel as odd as it smells?
Like a chlorine pool.
That's a really good question. I never thought about it, but no, not really.
You told me it was like falling in a swimming pool.
Yeah, it was just strange. I was more concerned about the fact that I'd fallen in pirates.
Shock.
Yeah, and
because on a hot day it does look refreshing sometimes. So
yeah,
can I just say I think you worked with a bunch of jerks. I don't know how in the world you put up with that for 4 years. But just as I would turn the page of the book, I'd just be like, "Oh my God, who are these people? Why would they treat someone like that?"
A lot of practical jokes.
Believe me, he got back at them. It was pretty much paybacks all the time. He could do a whole book on all the stuff that they did.
Now, what was your one thing where it was like with the guest interaction? Like I remember the one where you said the show started and you were caught off guard. Was there anything like that really sticks out as the one where like guests would have seen it and stuck out in their brain as a practical joke?
Oh God, where we actually pulled it where the guests saw it. Well, they were unintentional things when we got caught in a show.
In the Indian Village.
Yeah, the Indian Village was a funny one. It seemed like Tom and I were always getting caught in a show, making an emergency repair. The show was running, and there were guests all around. And the Indian Village, which unfortunately employs every so often found it amusing to rearrange all the Indians, squaws and the chiefs in some various positions.
Non-Disney-esque.
Cigarettes in their mouths. And so it got to be pretty funny. And usually they'd catch this before the park opened, and somebody didn't catch the fact that the Indian chief was on his horse backwards. Park was already, everything was running. Well, Tom and I jumped in our Pargo and we zipped over there to the Indian village, and we parked it back in the trees. And then as soon as it was all clear and the boat had gone by and the train had gone by, we ran out and we rearranged the chief and everything. And we said, well, we're here. Let's check real quick to see if there's anything else. Well, we hear the train coming, which goes sort of through part of the Indian village. Most of the Indians are on the water side. And so when we didn't have time to go anywhere except to run around behind a big teepee and stand there and hide. And as the train went past, we just kept moving. And we thought we were safe until we heard the whistle of the paddle wheeler coming around the turn. And we turned around, and here's the boat and all the people running over to the side of the boat to look at us and take our picture. Because obviously we weren't dressed as Indians. And Tom says, what do we do? And I said, just wave. And we just started moving like audio-animatronic figures, waving it.
Awesome. Just blend in. Now we're going to get back to the Rivers of America in a minute, because I want to talk about Leota again. But your other swimming escapades, I shouldn't even say escapades, you learned to scuba down there. You were one of the few people who scuba dived in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And we'll also talk about your scuba diving around the wave machine. But we learned last month in talking to Tom Navy how the 20,000 Leagues was originally spring-fed, and then it became chlorinated later on. Were you there for that transition, and what was it like diving there? My understanding is that you guys would stay down there as long as you could.
Oh, yeah. It was chlorinated by the time I got there.
Okay.
Which was nice. I'm glad it was, actually. But it was about 12 feet deep, and which was great for me. You didn't have to worry about getting the bends, because quite often we would go in whenever we wanted. We could swim anytime we wanted. So we'd come in and say...
Well, you didn't do it when the park was...
Well, no, it was always before the park opened, obviously. And we would sometimes go in to check the figures, which is what we were supposed to be doing, or helping putting in some things, but definitely checking to make sure everything looked all right. And if something needed to be pulled for us to redo, like a diver or a shark or a mermaid, we would tell them, the maintenance people, and they'd pull it that night, and we'd work on it the next day. But quite often we would just go in because we could and just swim around. And, of course, that's when the practical jokes got crazier than ever. Our air would get turned off.
Those stories, I'm just amazed at the level of quality control that was going on at the park at that time, because I don't think they do that anymore to that level. And the amount of latitude that you actually had to just go in and fix things as you felt it needed to be done.
Right. And as he says in the book, too, even if something was wrong, and you just mentioned, RJ, they would just pull it. The next morning, it would appear on your desk. You would fix it, and they would put it back on the next night or next evening, whatever it took.
We had one time that we got called because one of the guests, while waiting in the very first room when they went in the Haunted Mansion, and on the wallpaper that's in there, somebody had taken their fingernail and scraped a big section of it and pulled some of it off. And so we got a call, and we went in probably 20 minutes before the place was supposed to open, and quickly matched the color using acrylic tube paint and painted it so you couldn't tell it was gone until they could get wallpaper and replace that section.
That is amazing.
Yeah, so, just a matter of minutes and just clearing it up. And I think you're right. They just don't, that level of detail is not paid attention to.
The story that you have in the book where you basically have some tubes of paints and you're trying to match Dopey's eyelids on the fly while the show is running. I just don't see them doing that anymore.
It was
Sleepy.
Yeah, but I felt Dopey.
Sleepy is my main man, so I always...
Do you want me to... what happened there? Or you just
No, we'll let the listener. That's one of the very first stories in the book.
I mean, we want some people to buy the book.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. We'll let that. If you want to find out,
to me, that is just mind blowing. Knowing the way things work today.
That's right.
Yeah, that was the title of that. So now there's the stick in Sleepy's eye. So
that would intrigue people to read it.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. So the other swimming thing is the wave machine, and we want to, this is one of those holy grails for us and a lot of listeners, because there's so much limited information, and we've pieced together a lot of different things about it over the years, and we also have some additional people coming up that were there when it was working. But what did you find out about it, and what did you see when you dove next to it?
Yeah, it was my qualifying dive, and the guy, the scuba diver, he was one of the people that worked for Disney full time, and we put on our wetsuits and got in a little outboard boat, and we're going out into the middle of the lake there. The Seven Seas Lagoon, and we're heading toward this one of the small islands right in the middle, and we came around the side that faces the Polynesian Hotel, and we pull up, and here's a steel, very rusted, sticking out of the water just a little bit, and we tied off to that. He says, "We're going to dive here." I went, "Isn't this where the wave machine is that never worked?" And he said, "Oh, it worked. It worked. It's just when the wave finally got to the Polynesian beach, it was only a few inches high, because the wave machine would make the wave 3-4 feet high, whatever it was, when it worked, but they didn't realize they had to make a containment wall on each side all the way across the water to contain the wave, and the wave just dispersed outward, so that by the time it got to the Polynesian Hotel, it was only a few inches, hardly anything anybody wanted to surf on."
Right, right.
But I did see, when we dove, was absolutely amazing. There were thousands of fish around us. Yeah, I came home and told Susie, "You'll never guess where I was diving." Wave machine.
That's cool. So I wanted to go back to where we were, going back to the Rivers of America. You had a great story about Leota. If you want to give a sneak peek at it for the listeners.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit. It involved, Leota was wonderful. She came back while I was there too. I got a chance to be with her almost every morning. She would come over and see us and have coffee or breakfast with us, and even go around to some of the attractions with us in the morning. Well, this one morning, we got a call that the Indians were frolicking again, and so she thought it would be fun to go out with us, and we went out to the village, and it was mayhem. We had to straighten up all kinds of figures and put them back in the right places and everything. But we hear this very loud noise and turn around, and there's a very large real alligator not very far from us, and it's what Leota did that was hysterical and life-threatening, actually.
That's right. That's something.
I'll leave it at that.
That's the right.
Yeah.
And for our listeners who don't know, we are talking about Leota Toombs, who is one of the figure finishers and artists that worked at Imagineering in California. She is famous, most famous for being the face of Madame Leota and the namesake of Madame Leota in the Haunted Mansion in the Seance Circle, and also the voice and the face of Little Leota as you go up the exit of the Haunted Mansion.
She's from regions beyond.
And I actually got to work on both those figures and got a chance to ask Leota about the filming of that and how that transpired, and that's in the book too.
That's a great story. I love that old timey Imagineering stuff.
So
it's
the
just so
continuing moral of these stories is buy the book.
Yeah.
Now, Hal, there was some discussion a while back regarding that the glass in the Haunted Mansion ballroom scene had never been replaced. It couldn't be taken out. The building would have to be destroyed, and and RJ, I know you've disproven that myth that it indeed can be replaced.
Somebody who purported to know everything about the Haunted Mansion and actually had a site just on that, and I sent him an email and said, au contraire, never been replaced in the Haunted Mansion. So I said I was there when it happened, and it's a funny story. But
Also in the book.
And it's in the book. And and he came back and says, "Well, what happened? Tell me what happened." I went, "I'm not going to tell you." I thought you. I saw.
Well, now he can read about it.
Yes, now he can read it.
Yeah.
But,
I think the one question I have is, where were the extra panes of glass stored? Were they just off to the side in that same room?
You mean the one they finally took the glass out?
Yeah, the replacement glass.
When they took it out, I wish I could have been there to see that, because to actually then take it out, they just didn't because they took the roof off and lowered the new sheets of glass in with a big crane. To take it out, they didn't lift it out. They just shattered it. It all fell to the floor of the Haunted Mansion. And big chunks, about maybe anywhere from 6 to 8 inches across. And the glass is about half an inch to 5/8 inch thick. Well, they took it all around behind the Haunted Mansion when they did it, after they cleaned it up off the floor, and put it in a big pile. And then, of course, later, the next day, I think it was, they came in and hauled it all away, and they buried it so that nobody could get any of the glass and sell it. Well, our studio was behind Small World, and of course, just over to our right, across the little parking lot there, was the Haunted Mansion. We came out and we went, "Oh, look!" And we walked over to look at all the glass. When Lee and Tom and I left, there were 3 pieces missing.
I really appreciate this story in the book, because the not to give it away, but what you did with the spiders has been misrepresented as something that happened in Disneyland. So I'm so thrilled to hear A, that it happened at Walt Disney World, and B, that it was you that did it.
Maybe they copied you.
They thought
Disneyland did.
I never
copy
heard that. No, that was at Disney World. Yeah, to cover up these holes that had appeared in the glass, we made some spiders, and they were pretty good size, like the size of a tarantula, and we glued them over the holes, and then ran monofilament line up to the ceiling, and stretched it so it looked like the spider was just coming down a long strand of silk. Not silk, but spider webby stuff.
I think silk is the technical term for
that's
spider
the correct one.
webby
Spider
stuff.
silk.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I like the stories of you driving around the golf cart. I wish I could grab a golf cart and just kind of buzz around the Magic Kingdom after dark or whatever, before guests arrive. That had to be a hoot.
It's absolutely incredible to get there at 6 in the morning and the sun's coming up, and we'd leave our studio there and drive up to the we're on the back side of it's a Small World. We drive up the right side and go between Small World and where the sky.
The thing isn't there anymore.
Yeah, the thing is not there anymore.
It's now a restroom area.
Yeah, the Alpine lift. And we'd drive through there, and then to drive anywhere we wanted in the park. Now we do that too, especially going to Carousel of Progress and Space Mountain, because there was no way to get to those two from the tunnels. Otherwise, when the park was open, a lot of times we would drive through the tunnels and drive very fast and honk the horn so people could hear us coming, because of the curved tunnel. You couldn't see anybody. We were dangerous. We really were. We were always trying to go through big puddles of water and get everybody in the cart wet, or people walking nearby wet.
But not the characters.
No. I was the only one of the 4 artists that actually would stop and pick up the characters,
for which we were very grateful, because those costumes are extremely heavy.
Well, I was just about to say, I have after reading the book, I have a new, much more authentic appreciation, I believe, of what characters go through. So
you are not the first person to say that.
So I give you credit from people just think, oh, it must be hot in there, but the story of you being knocked from behind by a guest was interesting, to say the least, and sad and scary at the same time. But the shifts and all the different things, and now why they do the things they do today, where they have a character follower, what you call it. I don't want to call it a handler, but
while I was still there is when the union was forming for the characters, and that was one of the reasons why, was because we wanted more protection. And that was when we did start getting someone not in a costume, but in street clothes, always nearby where they were nervous. But that was happening just as I was leaving characters. And I did want to project a positive image about being in characters because I loved what I did. But in order for me to explain why I had to leave, I had to put those stories in about my injuries, because that's what finally did me in, kind of. But it's something, like you said, that everyone has an amazing amount of respect for me after I explained what was involved in being a character.
And being in characters, and so many of our friends being in characters that we got to know, and hearing the stories, they all have stories about guests unfortunately injuring them. And the only thing we could all figure out was people couldn't seem to differentiate between the fact that these were not cartoon characters. These were real people.
Right. They're not two-dimensional. There's actually people inside.
How stupid were people in the 1970s?
Really stupid, because we had a guy in an ape suit over by the Jungle Cruise almost drown. It was a orangutan outfit. And because of the way the costume was made, he was literally drowning. He couldn't get out because the weight of the water in the costume was not enabling him to get out of there. And it was two Jungle Cruise hosts that dove in and got him out.
Much deeper water there. And
there were some other stories, too. A guy getting punched and knocked out by a guy that thought it would be funny to punch it was actually one of the Chip and Dale when they were still bigger costumes. And there was a big guy in it, and he got just knocked unconscious. We had Pooh and Tigger get thrown over the Liberty Square Bridge into the air. And the guy in the Tigger outfit actually went into convulsions because he hit his spine, and they thought he might be paralyzed. I mean,
oh my gosh.
Ridiculous kind of things that you just think, my God, it was like the day the dwarves got beat up in Fantasyland in the middle of Easter, spring break time, and we couldn't believe it. I got my nose broken by a junior high school football player. It was that kind of stuff that it just boggles the mind to this day. I still don't understand. And like you said, it did lead to the fact that the characters are now, they don't get to do the kind of stuff we did. They don't roam around the park.
That's very rare.
And it's extremely rare to see that. And
Right.
That was such a cute story about you interacting with the character, Suzanne, when you were a monorail pilot out on the deck of the Polynesian waiting.
That was one of the monks, and that was great fun and terrific for me. Like I said in the book, as an actor, that's just like handing you candy.
Yeah.
This is fun. I'm enjoying this.
We always hear these stories of the old days where the characters would roam the parks, and even in some places apparently. And this is one of the things we don't know if it's true or not. We would hear stories where they would actually get on attractions with people and maybe ride the teacups or ride like Mr. Toad or something.
Yeah. They would do that. I never did that because I was always concerned about we had so little ability to see anything. It was like being a horse with blinders on. And I just was never comfortable as some of like Jimmy Gray that played our doc. He could do stuff that we just look at him and go, how can you do that? How can you even move in the direction you're moving? He climbed up on the Mickey floral wall. He said, I actually turned around one day when I was doing that, and Paul Bosch, who was the vice president of entertainment, was standing over there looking at me, shaking his head at me, and I kept nodding my head as Doc, and he kept shaking his head. So he said, I knew I was in trouble, but
well, you need to explain to the listeners that back then the costume for the dwarfs were different, and the dwarfs now have the use of their own hands.
And
back
arms
when Suzanne did it, the arms were extended.
Well, the costumes were much more elongated, so that we were actually looking through the hat of the dwarf.
Right.
And also our hands were in steel T-bars in the elbows of the dwarf. So everything from the elbow down was a solid fiberglass figure.
Fake hand.
So we couldn't sign autographs, and we couldn't hug little kids very easily.
Which is also, they couldn't figure out why Jimmy got up on the ledge of the wall, 4 feet up there, because he didn't have use of
Well,
the
he
hand.
wasn't that tall. Jimmy was
No.
only about 5'9", so yeah. But anyway.
He got in a garbage can one day too.
Oh yeah.
So RJ, before we move on to the listener questions that came in, I do have one other question for you. You worked on the model, or I should say, worked on keeping the model of the City of Tomorrow running up there on the next to the People Mover line. And at the time, you were writing that the cars and trucks were moving, the lights were working, the Ferris wheel was going around. I don't think any of us, unless how maybe you saw it, I don't ever recall riding that and actually seeing it function. I know it ceased to operate. It's a shadow of its former self. But what was that like back then, seeing that whole, it's only half the model that's there, but actually operate?
It was really cool because the maintenance people, the electricians, would keep those things working and the lights working and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. But we'd always then have to go in and check it every couple of weeks, because if they had been in there working on it, you walked on the model. First of all, we get them to stop walking on it with their shoes on. Whenever we worked on the Epcot model too, we took our shoes off. We were in our socks and we were walking on the model and crawling around. And so we'd go in there and we'd find trees that were crushed, sometimes a house, and things tipped over, and we'd fix all those things. But see, the problem is with the maintenance people, if something stopped working, and it was something they had to change a lot, they didn't bother with it. They just let it go. And eventually, if the head of that section of the park, let's say, was new, because they would shift around the operations people. They'd be in one area of the Magic Kingdom, like Tomorrowland, for a year, and then another year they're over in Fantasyland, and so they get to know everything and work their way up in the company. Well, once they shifted and a new person came in, unless they got the manual, and there were manuals for every single thing, including the model, if they didn't look in there and study it, and they looked at the City of Tomorrow and, well, it's lit, and they didn't know that the Ferris wheel is supposed to be going around or that the lights are supposed to be moving, it just stayed the way it was.
Yeah.
We had a constant battle with them on especially lights and
especially black lights, where they'd say, well, they're on.
Right. But they're not as good as they used to be. Yeah.
Ample. They're in the hearse that's in the cemetery of the Haunted Mansion. There is a red light in that hearse.
It's never on.
Everybody, when you go ride on it now, you're going to look at the hearse to see if the red light's on.
Well, it wasn't there when we were there in September.
It wasn't on when we were there in September. And when years later, when Suzanne actually went back into working in operations, and she was one of the hosts in the Haunted Mansion, I would come by and pick her up late at night after the mansion closed, and I'd be back in the offices with the lead or the supervisor, and we'd be sitting there talking while the employees are just going around and cleaning up real quick and checking everything. And he and I would get talking about stuff. And then one night I said to him, I said, that there's a red light in that hearse, and it's not on. He goes, no, there's no light in there. I said, yes, there is. I says, look in your manual. So he gets the big book out and looks at it, and he went, oh my God, there's a red light in there. He has to write a form out and send it down. It has to, form has to go to them, and then they come up and supposedly that night or the next night.
Well, and they came to him and said, who told you that light was in there?
He said they were so he says, told you there was a red light there.
See, I don't think they do the check forms at night anymore the way that they used to. I've had a friend who worked 20K, and he shared they had these like pull-off sheets where they would check the animation at night on the last boat through to see if something was not working, and then be able to leave a checklist behind for someone to go in and fix stuff the next day.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the artists that came in within just a few years after Epcot had opened, eventually it took all four of us left. Two went on to other things in Disney, and Lee left to go to Universal, and of course I had left. And the artists that came in didn't have that esprit de corps, and they didn't. I hate to say it, but they didn't care as much.
Well, they were.
Yeah. I think it's evident reading the book that you guys really worked there at a magical time where people cared, you cared about each other, people went out of their way to help each other to be able to move within the organization. It seemed like it was a really special time.
It was very magical. It was.
And it made it hard for me to tell when I eventually left in the 90s why I left without getting too negative or naming names or specifics. It was basically my own personal story that I was telling, and that's what I tried to keep it as. But I've had people that have read it that said, I thought you did a really good job of not getting into the dirt, because there's been so many negative books written about Disney and, that time and certain people and all that. I didn't want to get into any of that because it was our dream come true, and even... Right. Like I've told people, no matter when you work for a large company, you're never going to love everything that happens, And there was so much of what we did love. Yeah. That's why I stayed there as long as I did.
And we still love Disney. We still love going to Disney World, and we're still pixie dusted.
So going back to the comment of the guests, we do have some guest questions for you guys. So JT, we've got two people who wrote in with some questions for them, right?
Yeah, this first one's from somebody named Michelle. She said she'd love to hear more about your involvement, RJ, in Carousel of Progress and how they went about choosing paint, colors, fabrics, anything like that. Any details you'd have about that would be appreciated.
Oh, wow. Well, the costumes were all done by the costume department. So we didn't do that. We didn't have time to do that. And the wigs were all done by the wig department.
You did the dogs, but the wig women brushed them.
Yes. We did all the animal furs. I mean, we actually had to sew fur cloths for the dogs, the bears and Country Bear, everything else. But in Carousel of Progress, it was always very funny because the dog was supposed to be scruffy, and the wig ladies would come in and comb the wigs and make them perfect, and we'd come in a little bit, and then we'd look over at the dog, and the dog was just perfectly smooth, long, and we'd go over and scruff it up, and then the next night they'd brush it again. But the colors of everything, I mean, the figures, the sets, everything we did have books in our studio, and when we had to redo something, we would go in and we'd have a color sample of every single thing, and you had to match that color. Now, it might tell you possibly sometimes what colors were used to make that. We never had the colors pre-mixed. In fact, we would drive the the sign painters nuts, because when we would redo a whole show, we spent most of our time working on the figures and maybe some props. But if they were going to repaint sets, we didn't have time to do it, so we would get the sign painters, who were better than just house painters, to come in and paint those things. And the problem was, if their paint they had pre-mixed at the paint area back at the back of the property wasn't exact, they would paint it that color anyway. Well, that was a no-no for Disney. It had to be exact. And we would walk over and pick up other cans of paint and dump it in their paint and start mixing. It drove them crazy. That color had to be precise. And it was always that, making sure it was exactly the same. You didn't vary from that. And even in painting a figure's skin, you had the red tones in the cheeks of the young girl, like in last scene. It had to be the right shade, and you had to, working with acetone-based paint, which we used then, was something that dries extremely fast. There's a picture of me actually painting that girl with a artist brush, And what you don't know is that I'm moving that brush very quickly, because if I stop for a second, my brush would stick to the skin. It would dry instantly, right to the skin. You try to pull the brush off, and you can't. And if you do, it leaves all the bristles come out of your brush and stick to the skin. Then you can't just clean that spot, because you then can't paint it to match what you painted around. You have this circle in the you have to actually clean that whole area of the skin off and start over. So it can be very frustrating, and you learn to paint very fast and blend at the same time, which was very difficult. Yeah, people thought we used makeup. There was no makeup involved. It was paint.
That's just the artistic ability there is just is amazing.
Yeah, just keep not stop, but
and
somehow get it right.
Yeah, Alice Davis, who wrote the foreword for our book, whose husband was Mark Davis, one of the Nine Old Men and one of our bosses, but Alice designed all the costumes for Pirates of the Caribbean and Small World and Carousel of Progress. I mean, yeah, so I wish she's one of the Disney legends herself. And she and I have shared a lot of funny stories that there'll be more of in the next book about the Carousel of Progress.
And also Small World.
And Small World, yeah. And people always say, how do you stand to go in there in Small World? You also have to understand that every time we go into an attraction in the morning at 6 o'clock, we'd always come in 2 hours before the park opened, so that changed sometimes. But when we go out and split up and we go to different attractions to check them, and you'd walk into Carousel of Progress, it's already running. So if you're working on a figure, they're moving. And you had to be careful, because you could get knocked to the floor by one of them if they suddenly move and swing an arm out.
Nice. Snap on electric lights, and boom, down.
So fortunately, when the picture it's of me painting her, we were doing a rehab, so the figures were not moving for that. But yeah.
The second question I have is in relation to your story about Jiminy Cricket, and was there anything else you worked on that never made it onto a ride that you could think of, like a what if type thing?
Oh, well, Jiminy Cricket was the costume department at Disney World.
We don't have to tell the whole story.
Yeah, I'm going to tell some of it. But for some reason, they wanted to be the ones to design the costume character to walk around in the park of Jiminy Cricket. And this was 78, 79, somewhere in there. And they came back to our studio, and I was the only one of the 4 artists that could recreate the characters, drawing them and everything. So
you had to wait 25 years to see the character at Disneyland.
Yeah, I did a prototype of the character and everything, and they finally decided the character was too big. Which I said, well, Mickey Mouse is 6 foot.
The only other thing I can think of, which you probably wouldn't even remember, is when you painted the little thing of Cleo for the television special they were filming at Disney World.
Yeah, that's actually something that'll be in the next book. They were doing a television special of
a live-action Pinocchio story.
Yeah, and they were filming some of it on Main Street. I don't know why it was on Main Street, but a couple of young stars, I think it was a brother and sister at that time, I can't remember their names, but they were in it, and they had the costume characters of Geppetto and Pinocchio and everything, and they wanted to have, they had a big fish bowl, and they wanted the Cleo, the goldfish.
Yeah.
And it never occurred to them to have one made before they did the filming, because you can't train a fish, obviously. And they came back to us, and I actually painted Cleo on a piece of thick acetate, clear, and put a monofilament line on it, and they just dropped it down into the bowl.
But then they decided they didn't like it. It looked too flat.
Yeah, well, it was fine. They did a quick shot of it, and you'd see Cleo in the bowl, and they cut away from it, and they gave it back to me when they were done, and I don't think it made it into that show. But as far as anything in an attraction, no, no. Everything else we did while I was there, ended up in the attractions. Sometimes we ended up in the attractions.
So, well, guys, we have to wrap it up here. I really want to thank both of you for coming on, and I want to make sure our listeners know where to get the book, and it's called Together in the Dream. It's on Amazon, right? It's you've got a Kindle edition, you've got a soft cover.
You can also get it through themeparkpress.com.
Themeparkpress.com. There we go. So, coming up, I shouldn't say shortly, we're giving away one of your books this month in the Audio Rewind Puzzler. So somebody has a chance to win that this month as well. But I want to thank you, tremendously for coming on. A lot of great stories. I'm hoping that a lot of our listeners will grab your book and learn a little bit more about what you did and more about the background of the different things there. It's really neat to see that side of things. And there's a lot of books that claim to be backstage Disney and all this stuff, but to see it from your eyes and from a very well written narration of what you experienced there, told the stories in a great way, but also gave us a glimpse to the backstory and the underground Disney, so to speak, that you don't hear about, but in the right fashion. So really well done.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, RJ Suzanne, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it, and thank you for your time, and we look forward to the next book.
Yeah, please. Hope you'll have us back on when we have those out.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Thanks for your time. We'll see you soon.
Okay, we'll be listening.
Sounds good.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so it's the time to talk a little bit about the merchandise and other shirts. Last month, we released the Nunes Artificial Surf Corporation T-shirt. JT, you grabbed one of them, right? You had one.
Yeah, I got one for me and one for my daughter. They showed up. They're so cool. We have like matching Nunes Wave Machine shirts now to wear, and then my wife was mad because we didn't get her one. So now I got to order a third one now.
Did you get the ash gray?
I got blue, and then Lily's running a pink. Nice. So it looks cool on pink too. Like I was surprised. It's awesome. It's a sweet design.
And I got some stickers, which are great. We'll throw those in if anybody wins whoever wins the prize this month. I also got a nice Roy's Cabin notebook and a Nunes Wave Machine notebook as well. They're really cool. And if you follow us, we gave away 3 notebooks this month.
Oh yeah.
And we also had the 20% off coupon a couple times. So got to follow us on Twitter. Or on Facebook and watch. We'll get you discounts on this. So what are we talking about? We always have a new design every month.
Thank you for clarifying. Do not follow us in real life. Just Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah, we don't need any of that
because that's just creepy.
It's just weird. Yeah. Follow us electronically as much as you want.
But how you gonna say all day, whatever. Crack into our iPhones. Go ahead, try it.
Right, fine. See if you can find us. How you got a new one for this month, though, right?
After last month's episode, I was so impressed with Tom and Abby's story that we're doing a Nabby Grabber.
There we go. Look at that.
Yep.
That's going to be sweet. I'm hoping for like ex-cast members getting it. Like it just goes viral amongst the old.
We're certainly going to make sure we put one of those in Tom Nabby's hands.
Absolutely. Yes. And look, RJ and Suzanne, we just spoke with them. They use the Nabby Grabber. They'll certainly need one of those, at least a sticker, if not a T-shirt. So.
And we had the one guy tweeted us with the Captain EO shirt.
Oh yeah, he was in front of Space Mountain.
That's so right. If you have merchandise, whatever it is, like mugs, it's really cool to see it out in the wild. So if you get something, send us a picture on Twitter or wherever.
So the new shirt, new design for all the merchandise will be the Nabby Grabber, available shortly. And you can check that out at retrodisneyworld.com/support us. And all the proceeds help to continue this podcast running, do our film restorations, and eventually for a nice get-together at some point in the future.
And if any of our listeners would like to get one of Hal's designs tattooed on them, we will make the artwork available to them.
That's right.
And Hal will sign in felt pen so that you can then have his signature tattooed.
Right.
Is that the moment you've made it a designer, like when somebody has a tattoo of something you did? Is that ever happened?
Yeah, that's it. Wherever you want it. We don't care. It's a don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah, yep. Hal will sign wherever.
Yeah.
So, no problem.
I have no coup.
All right, so next month, guys, we're going to go back to a little bit of our roots, right? We're going to go back and do an attraction. I know we've done a lot of interviews, but we want to go back to our roots and focus on some of the old attractions for the next couple episodes. So, Hal, you've got one in mind, right? I think we're gonna.
Yeah, with everyone's permission, I'd like to spend a little time with one of my close personal friends, Mr. Toad.
Let's do it.
That's an awesome idea. It's sorely missed. And
I did ride this. I was not.
Oh, that's good. You were born for this one.
I thought I was really driving it and controlling it, but
he was 2.5, but he was.
I just rode it a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah, all right. We were well, it'll be an interesting comparison for the version we know and also what's out in Disney.
Yeah, so. I wrote it a couple of weeks ago and just finished reading Raleigh Crump's book, so you got to read all about the Florida version. And experience the California versions.
Exactly.
Yes, and one of our very favorite people, besides Raleigh Crump, is one of the big reasons that it got built the way it was in Florida. So we'll be able to talk about that too.
Capacity.
That's right. Capacity.
More to come.
Hal's all ready to talk. We should just start recording now. But it is the time to close out. We're going to say real quick thank you to our sponsors and end it for this month. So for all your Orlando ticket area needs, visit Ticketmama.com for less than gate prices. And Rental Car Mama, when we're visiting Orlando, visit RentalCarMama.com for discounts at Advantage Rent-A-Car and other firms. And by OrlandoVacation.com, vacation homes and discount hotels for the savvy Florida traveler. All right. If you're interested in sponsoring the Retro Disney World podcast, please email us at info@retrodisneyworld.com. As always, thank you to our listeners. Keep the emails and phone calls coming. We love hearing from all of you. Give us a shout out with a review at iTunes if possible. Let all your family and friends know about us. You can follow us on Twitter. As we said, we give away different things during the month, different chances, coupons, all sorts of great stuff. Follow us. And all right, with that, Brian, take us out.
Follow Todd McCartney and Retro Disney World on Twitter and Instagram at RetroWDW. On Facebook at Retro Disney World. And for all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at RetroDisneyWorld.com. On Twitter, follow our hosts, Hal Bowers at GoAwayGreen, for JT Cougar at Hoagie's Garage, and you can find me on Twitter and Facebook at Brian P. Miles.